Michelle Huang Giles was born on October 3, 1984, in San Diego to parents of Vietnamese descent. Her parents fled the military conflict in the 1970s, surviving a dangerous boat journey and time in refugee camps. But in America, they found stability and a new life, living as a large family and honoring Vietnamese traditions. Michelle's mom, who worked as a nurse, became a true inspiration to her daughter. She instilled in her a desire to learn and an interest in medicine. Being the eldest of 15 cousins, Michelle grew up early, taking care of the younger ones. Her childhood was spent in the family's San Diego suburb of Rancho Penasquitos. It was a quiet, safe neighborhood with parks, coffee shops, and good schools where a friendly Vietnamese community lived as one. Here, Michelle developed strong family ties. However, in 1994, when Michelle was 10 years old and her brother Michael was 7, their mother suddenly became ill with breast cancer. In order not to frighten the children, she hid her diagnosis and courageously fought the disease alone. It wasn't until after her death in 1999 that Michelle and Michael learned of the suffering their mother had gone through, trying to keep them safe from grief and fear. It was a hard blow, especially for 14-year-old Michelle, who took on the care of her younger brother. They moved in with an aunt who was raising children of the same age and found support in a large family. But Michelle had to grow up early to become not only a sister for Michael, but also a mentor, replacing her mother. Michelle's youth was marred by the loss of her mother, but her best friend Christina was with her during this difficult time. The girls were inseparable, and Christina helped Michelle cope with her worries. And Michelle taught her how to be a real lady, to apply makeup, write her first love notes, go shopping. In high school, the shy but pretty Michelle had many admirers. However, the real friend she found a very different girl, a quiet Giselle Divac Esteban, with whom they met by chance in a cafe. Sociable Michelle helped Giselle to loosen up. They were very close because they had a lot in common: Filipino-American origin, upbringing in strong immigrant families of San Diego with their strict traditions. Both girls were ambitious and dreamed of connecting life with medicine, like Michelle's mom. So they became inseparable friends, graduated from high school together in 2002, and enrolled in colleges to continue their studies in medical school. They moved from San Diego to San Francisco for new perspectives and independence. In San Francisco, the fates of the friends diverged. At first, they studied in different colleges, immersed in their studies. But in 2003, Michelle transferred to the University Giselle. Here, she made new acquaintances, including with a guy named Scott Marasegan. A mutual liking arose between them, but they decided to remain friends. Soon, Giselle and Scott began to spend more time together. At first, Michelle wanted to date Scott, but then sincerely supported her friend's romance. The girls often went on double dates, but over the years, their paths became increasingly divergent. In 2005, Giselle and Scott had a daughter, Isabel. The young mother left her studies, got a job in a kindergarten, but the relationship with Scott soon gave a crack because of Giselle's jealousy. As a result, the couple broke up. Meanwhile, Michelle persistently went to her dream, to become a nurse like her mother. She worked as an accountant in the firm, was in a serious relationship with her boyfriend Tommy. Contact with Giselle was reduced to rare messages and social networks. In 2010, Michelle enrolled in an accelerated nursing program at Samuel Merritt University in Oakland. Instead of 2 years, the program would take only 12 months to complete. It was a success she proudly shared with former friend Giselle in hopes of reconnecting. But Giselle was far from her former friendship with Michelle. A corrosive jealousy flared up in her heart, poisoning her mind with crazy speculations. She was convinced that during their friendship, Scott had cheated on her with Michelle. All the denials of ex-boyfriend and girlfriend seemed like brazen lies to Giselle. Giselle blamed Michelle for her divorce from Scott and the loss of her family. Passions ran high as Michelle moved closer to realizing her dream of becoming a nurse. Successful, accomplished in her relationship with Tommy, she radiated a happiness that had become poison to Giselle. Day by day, Giselle became more and more overcome with an obsession to get revenge on the separatrix, as she called Michelle. The woman began sending angry messages to Scott's ex, accusing him of being a friend of hers. By the spring of 2011, Giselle Esteban's obsession had gone too far. It was no longer enough for her to make accusations about Michelle to Scott. Blind jealousy clouded her judgment, and a sinister plan of revenge matured in her clouded mind. Giselle decided to infiltrate Michelle's educational institution, Samuel Merritt University, where she was interning. Using a fake pass from new employee Elaine St. Augustine, the intruder entered the building unhindered. Overnight surveillance footage shows a woman in a nurse's uniform wandering through empty classrooms, scrutinizing student rosters and their internship schedules at Kaiser Permanente Hospital. Giselle hatched an insidious plan to kidnap and massacre Michelle using her own hospital shift. The night before the tragedy, Giselle snuck into the college reception area and stole Elaine Augustine's personal information from the desk, which enabled her to obtain a freshman pass. The monitor clearly shows her face, the footage that became the fatal evidence for Giselle. May 27, 2011 was an ordinary May day in Oakland. No one could have predicted that it would turn into an unbearable tragedy for someone else. Carefree Michelle Lee, the pride of her family and the student body, was headed to her final shift at Kaiser Permanente. It was the last milestone before earning her coveted nursing degree. Upon arriving at the hospital, Michelle left her belongings in the break room and around 7 p.m. informed the nursing staff that she would be going out briefly to the attached garage to pick up medications for patients. The girl was a competent and responsible student, and her decision did nothing to alarm her co-workers. And shortly after 9 p.m., when the instructor gathered a group of students to discuss final exams and post-grades, everyone was horrified to discover that Michelle never returned from the parking lot. Her phone was silent. Her personal belongings were left in the locker room. The teacher and security guard immediately went to the multi-level parking garage to search. They found Michelle's standard parking space and her brand new white Honda empty. Deciding that perhaps the girl had gotten sick, the men began combing through the rows of cars. Suddenly, a white SUV drove toward them from the dark underground lot. The teacher waved her hands, trying to stop the driver and find out if he had seen Michelle. But he sharply backed up and sped away at full throttle, almost hitting a neighboring car. The situation seemed highly suspicious and inexplicable. If Michelle needed to make an emergency trip, why didn't she warn the staff? It seemed that the girl deliberately wanted to avoid meeting with the teacher and the security guard. Phone calls and messages to loved ones, and Michelle went unanswered. By 10 p.m., the decision was made to contact Hayward police. The girl had disappeared from the hospital without leaving a single explanation, and her rookie car never left the parking lot. The case was taking a sinister turn. Initially, the police were not too alarmed by the disappearance of an adult female student. Sometimes girls leave for personal reasons, they thought. The next day, however, the situation escalated dramatically. Around 4 a.m., a local resident woke up to engine noise and voices outside. When the man looked out the window, he noticed someone's SUV driving into the yard of a neighboring new building on Ponderosa Court. But the identity of the driver could not be discerned. That's where Michelle's white Honda was found abandoned the next morning. The car was unlocked. Inside, there were boxes of goods from online stores, perfume, shoes. It seemed that the student had just gone out shopping that fateful evening. However, a closer inspection revealed a more sinister picture. On the passenger seat, clearly visible traces of blood. And in the luggage compartment, bloodstains were so abundant, as if someone had been lying there bleeding for a long time. Forensics quickly established that the blood belonged to Michelle herself. By its quantity, it became clear the girl was severely beaten. Even on the asphalt of the medical center parking lot, the special services found washed, bloody traces. The tragedy played out in this very garage. Cops took all the evidence from the car for a thorough analysis. Multiple fingerprints were found in the cabin, as well as several hairs that could leave a clue to the identity of the perpetrator. Intensive search with the involvement of volunteers and special equipment unfolded in the surrounding area. In the nearby canyons, forest belts, rivers. But no trace of the girl could not be found. Michelle seemed to have vanished into thin air. Then the detectives had to go to the next round of research and carefully study the nearest environment of the student. Who in her life could have wanted to harm her? Who had the motives for reprisal? One of the key figures in the dead girl's entourage was her former school friend, Giselle Esteban. The friends had once been inseparable, but in recent years their friendship had frayed. When the detective invited Giselle in for questioning, she behaved nervously and contradictorily. Contrary to expectations, the girl did not show a single drop of concern about the fate of her once best friend. Moreover, Giselle began to pour dirt on Michelle, accusing her of lying and betrayal. According to Giselle, behind the mask of a kind and decent girl, Michelle hid her true evil nature. She had allegedly once inflicted a terrible offense on Giselle by sleeping with her fiancé, Scott Marasegan. Giselle was convinced that that long-ago affair had led to the breakup of her family with Scott and the birth of a child out of wedlock. Out of Giselle's turbulent flood of emotions, horrifying details emerged. It turns out that she learned of her fiancé and Michelle's alleged extramarital affair before her daughter Isabel was born. When Michelle shared the story of her unwanted abortion with her as a friend, Giselle smelled something wrong. She was certain that Scott was the father of the fetus. From that moment on, a jealous Giselle began tracking down the lovers and finding phantom evidence of their relationship. Throwing glances at each other, casual touches, meeting together. It was enough for the obsessive girl not to doubt the dirty connection of her fiancé and best friend. Scott and Michelle vehemently denied the accusations, calling it a figment of Giselle's sick imagination. But the jealous woman was adamant. She fell into an abyss of paranoia, beginning to search for more and more incriminating details in every step of her closest people. As a result, years of bitter jealousy and betrayal ravaged Giselle's family. She broke up with Scott, but she couldn't put the pain behind her. The following years only fueled Giselle's obsession with revenge. She saw the prosperous Michelle moving purposefully towards her dream of becoming a nurse, whereas Giselle herself was treading water, raising little Isabel alone. Michelle's success in her studies, her stable relationship with her longtime boyfriend Tommy only fueled the jealousy in Giselle's soul. In the jealous woman's eyes, her happy friend was nothing more or less than a separatrix who had kidnapped Giselle's family and child. Frantic thoughts of revenge took over Giselle's mind. She began sending Scott angry messages attacking Michelle, studying her victim's social media page, looking for any little thing that could make her angry. In one of the audio messages which Scott saved as proof of his ex-wife's mental illness, the full depth of Giselle's paranoia can be seen. "That hypocritical bitch is still trying to get you off my back, isn't she? I see the way she at you with her lustful eyes, and her perfect pious nun face. Combed hair, modest dress, ugh, she pisses me off. You were supposed to be mine, Scott, my family, but that bitch ruined everything. I swear I'll get revenge on her for everything." Over time, an embittered Giselle became obsessed with destroying Michelle at all costs. She was convinced that otherwise her life would have no meaning or peace. When Michelle enrolled in an accelerated medical school program in 2010, it finally became the last straw for Giselle. She decided that her life's mission was to destroy her insolent rival before she gained the upper hand. Giselle Esteban realized that alone, she would hardly be able to cope with the supple young body of a tough medical student. So she devised a cunning plan worthy of a real nightmare. Giselle tracked down Michelle's internship schedule at Kaiser Permanente Hospital. On that fateful evening of May 27, 2011, the girl had to work her last shift before receiving her diploma. Such a lucky chance might not come again. A few days before, Giselle had carried out a daring theft at Michelle's educational institution. Using a fake pass from Elaine St. Augustine, a new employee at the university, the intruder broke into a locked part of the building. Camera footage shows her scrutinizing schedules and student rosters, apparently looking for information about her victim. That same night, Giselle returned to the reception area to steal an ID from Elaine Augustine herself. For her plan, she needed a real ID, not a fake one, to gain access to the medical facility. Now all the intruder had to do was wait until Michelle's last shift and follow her to the hospital garage. There, she could do her sinister scenario. It was the evening of May 27th. Giselle Esteban parked her white SUV near Kaiser Permanente Medical Center and took a wait-and-see attitude. She knew that around 7 p.m., Michelle had to go out to the garage to pick up medications for her patients. Giselle took with her a stolen ID badge, which she hoped would avert any suspicion, and a stolen paralyzing pistol. Through the panoramic windows of the hospital, the intruder waited and watched what was going on inside. Finally, she saw the unsuspecting Michelle tell the nurse that she was going to go to the garage for a while. The girl took a quick step towards the passage leading to the parking lot. Giselle hurriedly followed, trying to stay out of sight of the staff and other students. She only had a few minutes to wait for her victim in the parking garage. Hiding behind a concrete column, she prepared for her attack. Michelle soon appeared, nonchalantly striding toward her white Honda. The intruder grabbed the girl from behind and pistol-whipped her several times in the head. Stunned and exhausted, Michelle collapsed to the floor. Giselle dragged her bleeding body to the far corner of the parking lot to her car. She struggled to drag the bloody victim into the back seat, leaving a trail of blood. The perpetrator then climbed back into the passenger compartment and sped off at full speed straight down the steps to the outside. Apparently, at that moment, she was noticed by the teacher and the guard, which Giselle did not recognize at the time. She sped away, taking with her Michelle's breathless body and the terrible truth about what had happened. The next morning, the neighborhood was in an uproar after popular student Michelle Lee disappeared. Her car was found abandoned near the hospital, but there was no sign of her. Michelle's relatives and numerous friends did not believe in her voluntary disappearance. It was out of character for such a diligent student to drop out just before finals. Everyone realized that something terrible had happened. Family and volunteers organized a massive search effort, combing the canyons and forests around Oakland. On the roads hung posters with Michelle's photo and the announcement of a large reward of $65,000 for valuable information. Day by day, however, the search efforts dwindled, replaced by a sense of hopelessness. The student was never found alive, but each time more and more terrible evidence against Giselle Esteban appeared. Her phone was picked up in the same locations as Michelle's cell phone on the night of her disappearance. Numerous fingerprints and Giselle's biological traces, blood, hair, shoe impressions, were found in the victim's car. The final straw was added by an unexpected statement from Giselle's ex-boyfriend, Scott Marasegan. It turned out that in his car accidentally found a white cell phone supposedly belonging to the disappeared Michelle Lee. All the evidence clearly pointed to Giselle's involvement in the tragedy. She was arrested on charges of kidnapping and murdering her ex-girlfriend in September 2011. Despite the arrest of the suspect, the search for the body of Michelle Lee continued for another long 2 months. Volunteers and special agents explored hundreds of acres of wilderness around Oakland, and only on September 17th, one of the search dogs led his guide to a remote canyon not far from where the girl disappeared. Bone remains were discovered under a thick layer of branches and debris. Forensic experts were soon able to confirm this is the body of the unfortunate nurse Michelle Huang Giles. After so many months of agonizing search, she could not be brought back alive. The autopsy found numerous fractures, bruises, and lacerations on the body, clearly left by a cold weapon. However, the exact cause of death could not be determined due to the severe degree of decomposition of the body. The discovery has brought some relief to Michelle's family. At least now they will be able to mourn and bury their own daughter, who was never able to realize her dream of becoming a nurse. Giselle Esteban, who was arrested, denied all the accusations, declaring her innocence. She continued to persist in her jealous fantasies, assuring everyone that Michelle had stolen her husband from her and ruined her marital happiness. Despite the seemingly insane logic of her excuses, detectives meticulously collected a number of irrefutable evidence against the suspect. In September 2012, a high-profile jury trial took place. In the dock, 28-year-old Giselle continued to play the victim, accusing Michelle of having an affair with her husband and allegedly resulting jealous revenge. However, no proof of her words, other than emotional blabberings, was ever presented to the investigation. Continued in Chapter 14. The evidence of Giselle's own guilt, on the other hand, was abundant. Her location on the phone signal matched the geolocation of Michelle's cell phone on the night of the tragedy. Giselle's biological traces, blood, hair, prints, were found in the victim's car. CCTV footage recorded her entering the school disguised as a new employee shortly before Michelle's disappearance. A cell phone belonging to the missing student was found in Giselle's car. Experts found soil and vegetation particles from the area where the body was found on the defendant's clothing. In addition, Giselle's ex-husband, Scott Marasegan, provided the court with evidence of the ex-spouse's mental illness. He read out a number of her voicemail messages openly threatening Michelle Lee over an alleged affair. Giselle herself continued to insist on her jealous version and accused Michelle and Scott of betrayal. However, the jury found her ramblings extremely unconvincing against the alleged charge. As a result, on October 29, 2012, the jury reached a guilty verdict. Giselle Esteban was found guilty of first-degree murder of her former best friend, Michelle Lay. On December 10th, the verdict was announced. Chapter 15. Sentencing. Giselle Esteban received the harshest possible sentence of 25 years in prison, with parole eligibility only after the minimum term. While hearing the sentence, the convict continued to vehemently deny her involvement in Michelle's death. She shouted loudly about her alleged infidelity and sobbed, assuring everyone of her innocence. Her lawyers never managed to convince the jury in the version about jealous murder on the grounds of unrequited love. Relatives and friends of Michelle Lee, on the contrary, took the verdict with relief. They were handed down punishment for a senseless and cruel murder. During the announcement of the verdict, Michelle's mother could not hold back her tears. She told how her daughter had always dreamed of becoming a nurse, helping people and saving lives. But an obsession with the sick imagination of one jealous woman took away that opportunity. On that fateful May evening, Giselle kidnapped Michelle right from the medical center, where she came to practice before the defense of her diploma. Having tracked down the girl in the garage, the criminal inflicted brutal blows on her and forced her into the trunk of her car. Experts found traces of Michelle's blood everywhere, in the hospital garage, in her own car, and even in the canyon where the remains were found. The killer acted with astonishing cruelty, simply because her mind was clouded by morbid, jealous hallucinations. The news of the verdict was an eye-opener for everyone involved in the high-profile case of the disappearance of the medical student. Michelle's family was finally able to bury her with honors, and Giselle Esteban went to serve her long prison sentence for the heinous crime. So the final chapter in the fate of the two once close friends became the finale of their friendship, destroyed by morbid obsession, jealousy, and cruel madness. The hell of jealousy settled in the mind of Giselle, completely consumed her mind and the bright bond that once united the two girls. She preferred to become a prisoner of her own fantasies than to recognize the happiness of her former friend.